Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you do not know who I am, I go by Strange, and today we're going to be talking about Caine from the Amazing Digital Circus. It goes without saying, if you haven't watched the show, I would highly recommend watching it and then coming back to this video. In today's drawing, I will be depicting Caine as more villainous and sinister, so I hope you enjoy the drawing as well. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you enjoy it. With that, let's get started. Caine being an AI of unwilling human participants in the digital circus definitely has stirred up some controversy from the very beginning of the show. Is Caine a villain? And my answer is yes, Caine is a villain, but not in the way that you would think. Caine is not purposefully made a villain for a reason. I would even go as far as saying that Caine is not a villain at all. More so the antagonist that's going to create the conflict within the circus. Whether he means to or not, he's going to create a lot of problems for the participants, and there may be more to him than what meets the eye. To really understand Caine as a character, you need to start at the beginning. And not the beginning of the show, but rather the beginning of when he was created. Caine was created to be an AI that's basically in charge of all the participants and players of the Amazing Digital Circus. In other words, he's in charge of keeping them entertained. Now, notice this key difference of entertained versus happy. To be entertained in a video game, which is what the Amazing Digital Circus is implied to be, you don't necessarily need to be happy. You just need to be engaged. Caine's only motive in the circus is to make sure that Ragatha, Pomni, Jax, Gangle, and Zoogle are all entertained by his adventures. He wants them to have a good time at his adventures because that is what he is created for. The only issue is that none of the players in the circus are willing to play his games. They're not willing to be in his adventures because they're not there by their own admission. And that fact by itself already deters from his mission, his prompt, his purpose. All the characters are essentially suffering in this circus because they never chose to be here and they're not given the option to leave. Even if the adventures themselves are entertaining, the issue isn't the entertainment factor. It is not because Caine can't create good adventures. It is because the players know that no matter what, they cannot leave. They cannot choose to opt out of the adventures because if they choose to opt out, they'll still be stuck within the circus. But Caine's program can't allow him to understand this fact. His director is telling him that the players are there for a reason. The players willingly came into the circus, so they're looking to be entertained. Even if it's not necessarily true, his function is going to tell him regardless that the characters are here willingly, regardless of anything that the characters say. Because he's an AI, he's a machine, he's not a person. Things that contradict his program are going to not make sense to him, which is why he's always questioning, why don't the players like my adventures? What is so wrong about my adventures? Why are they not entertained? He quite literally does not have the capacity to understand that the characters are not entertained because they are being forced to be there. So when the players say things that contradict his program, he quickly starts to glitch. And we could see this in his little therapy talk with Zoogle. Him comprehending that what he's doing isn't helping the players, isn't entertaining the players, his adventures are not what is needed, is contradicting his program and therefore glitching him the hell out. These facts are not a way of babying Caine. They're not a way to say that he doesn't understand what he's doing, but necessarily the fact that he cannot understand what he's doing. No matter how much they are asking him to comprehend human emotions, what is being asked of him is to understand something that is far out of his program. And that right there is what's going to cause the real conflict in the circus. Now that we have defined Caine as a character, his purpose, and basically who he is, we can talk about the latest episode where he had a lot of issues with the players. Basically, we all remember the end of the episode where Caine is revealing to the cast, oh guys, I was just pretending, like this is just an adventure. It was a pretty good escape the circus adventure, right? And a lot of points of contention come with the fact that Jax at the end of the episode points out all these inconsistencies in in Caine's statements. The one being most important is the fact that he said he cannot mess with the player's mind. To summarize this idea, it's basically just saying that Caine, the AI, cannot actually affect what the player is thinking or cannot control the player in any type of way. Now, do I believe personally that Caine can control the players? I actually don't, and here's why. It doesn't make sense that Caine, as the AI host, would have some sort of control over the players' choices, because the program runs on the assumption that all the players are there for the reason of playing the game. There's no reason that Caine would have to force them to make certain choices. Therefore, he shouldn't have the ability to do so. And Caine defends himself by saying that he basically can only do temporary modifiers to the players. Temporary effects that will be more engaging to the players as they go through the adventure. In this part, I do believe. There's no reason to why Caine would have control over the players' actions. It doesn't make sense. There's no logical reason that him as an AI would be given that in his program. I feel like we could probably rule out that idea. I'm not trying to completely rule out the idea that he is affecting the characters. Like I said before, he's claimed that he can add temporary modifiers to the games, to his adventures. My idea is that Caine is giving these effects to the characters and they're backfiring. Of course, everything I've been saying is a theory and will continue to be a theory until the end of the show, and we could see the ending and be like, oh my god, I was so wrong, or I was so right. But I really do think that these modifiers are backfiring on him, and in turn, they're making him look worse than he actually is. In a way, he's not trying to alter the way that the characters are acting or thinking. He's trying to alter their response to the adventures. All the effects that we've seen the characters receive have been in some way to get a reaction out of them. We have Ragatha, who responds by being basically drunk out of her mind. We have Jax, who responds by having his whole identity crisis. They're responding to the adventures. They're interacting with the adventures more so than if they didn't have those modifiers. And I believe that Caine prefers this to no reaction at all, because them interacting with the content at least means that is potentially entertaining for the characters involved. To sum things up, Caine is trying to affect the characters, but more so in the way of a reaction rather than outwardly controlling them. For example, how I imagine Jax's adversity to meat and becoming a vegetarian is I imagine that Caine gives him some sort of effect that kind of grosses him out when he's around meat. Now, Jax would still be in control of that reaction. Caine wouldn't be in control of the way that Jax reacts to that piece of meat. And you may ask yourself, why is this engaging Jax? The voting system in that episode not only engages Jax, but in the entire cast of characters. Jax may not like being a vegetarian, but she sure is taking the adventures way more seriously when he becomes one, because he knows there's stakes now, and adding stakes to those adventures creates a more engaging environment for everyone. Ragatha wasn't exactly not engaged in the adventure during the fast food episode, however, her disengagement creates an environment where every other character has to basically pull her weight. And in other words, what does that mean? It means they have to be more engaged. All of what Caine is doing is purposeful, so that is why he's not entirely innocent in his actions. But I don't think that Caine is purposely trying to cause harm to the players. He's just willing to do a lot more than what probably is morally right to get them to enjoy his adventures. Now let's take a small break from theorizing about all of Caine's intentions, and I want to talk about the art for a minute. For this fan art, I really wanted to create a sort of depiction of Caine Not necessarily how I accurately see him, but more so just inspired by all the Caine fan art I've seen, where they kind of portray him as like this villainous, like secretive overlord of the digital circus. It's just some crazy stuff. But I low-key eat it up every time. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but if you do, if you know, you know. And honestly, as much as I don't think he's purposely like a villain, I think it would be so cool to imagine him as one, and maybe further into the series, he does have like some sort of switch in his demeanor that just creates this really intimidating villain. And I think that would be really cool. Like something changes him. So I really wanted to depict that here. One of the most like creepy things I can think about when it comes to Caine's character is just the fact that he's always watching. I don't like the idea of like cameras always being pointed at me, let alone not knowing about it. The paranoia of being watched has to be crazy in the circus. I thought it would be cool to really lean into that idea of just Caine is always watching, better watch out. He has all these files on the characters, he's collecting information on them 24 hours, and it's like a surveillance type villain. I don't know. And I also wanted to just include like the pop-ups as like the files. It was a lot of ideas that I just wanted to bring into one. I obviously included his all-seeing eyes, and I thought it would be cool to have the background be like this blue, kind of representing the choice that the characters had to make at the last episode, where they had to choose either the blue button to leave the circus or the red button to stay in the circus with Caine. I really wanted him to be the main focus, but not in like, boom, he's here, but more like he's always been here. I don't know if anybody gets what I'm saying, but if you know, you know. Let's talk about the most prominent theory I've seen within the fandom in the past few days. Now, personally, I know this theory has been floating around the internet for a while, but I've never seen it as much as I have, considering the trailer that came out not too long ago. This theory involves Bubble as a character actually being a virus in the circus. The idea of this theory comes from a virus that was active, I think, in 1999 or in the 1990s, some point there. There was a computer virus, I think through emails, that could interrupt your computer without having to have any attachment to it. A lot of theories are saying that Bubble is a virus that will be affecting Caine's actions. Given the trailer that we've seen, I'm not 100% sure how much of that is accurate, but I'm really hoping it is, because it would be really cool, and it would prompt Caine to act a little more sinister than what he has. If he's being infected by a virus, I imagine that will enhance his obsessive tendencies. Either way, I think it will be a good opportunity for Caine to step out of his element without completely destroying his character as we know it. And I do think that there is like a very weird dynamic that Bubble and him have, where I think it would make sense that Bubble is some sort of virus or is not supposed to be in the circus. Bubble is the type of character that doesn't feel like he's exactly supposed to be in the circus. What do I mean by that? If you look closely to the relationship that both Bubble and Caine share, you'll see some really weird tidbits in between. This is mainly found in the way that Bubble speaks with Caine and interacts with Caine, and the confusion Caine demonstrates when Bubbles sort of says something that is out of line. As stated by Caine before, the digital circus is supposed to be a family-friendly, all ages included type of game. However, if we look at Bubbles' dialogue, we see that a lot of it is far from it. Now consider this, Caine and the NPCs are supposed to be family-friendly themselves, right? You're not going to add something to the game that's inappropriate and abrasive because it wouldn't fit with what the intended experience for the game is. Now enter Bubble, who is consistently making and saying inappropriate jokes that don't seem like they would fit into the brand of the circus. The big question is, why would Bubble, a non-playable character, an assumed assistant AI for Caine, or maybe just an NPC he keeps around, why would he need those lines? Why would he even have that in his program? Those types of questions are what have led me to believe in this theory a lot more than I probably would have initially, because putting all the puzzle pieces together, it doesn't quite make sense. Although Bubble's purpose is not clear, we can understand that Bubbles is, like any other NPC or AI, restricted to the circus programming. And an NPC that can go against a program's restrictions and guidelines doesn't seem viable to be in the circus in the first place. He's out of place, and even Caine has moments where he seems uncomfortable when he's around. This leads me to believe that Bubble is, even if he's not entirely a virus, not supposed to be within the circus. And if there's anything that isn't supposed to be in the circus, it would be a virus or some sort of computer malfunction. To summarize my thoughts on the Caine character controversy, say that 3 times fast, I think that Caine is a really complex character to understand, but a lot of how I understand him is from a logical standpoint and how programs usually run. I think some of the issues within the fandom is that a lot of people want to humanize him and want him to have human emotions, but at the end of the day, Caine is an AI. Nothing he does is going to go against this program. He's not suddenly going to stop caring about his adventures because that is what he's made for. He can't prioritize Ragatha, Pomni, Kinger, Jax, Gangle, and Zubul, because if what they need is to not attend adventures, then it goes against what he's made for. However, this doesn't exclude Caine from being responsible for what happens within the circus and, of course, his actions. He may be less in control of his actions than actual human people, but that doesn't mean he necessarily is in the right. That doesn't mean that his adventures aren't causing psychological pain to everybody involved. That doesn't mean that what he's doing is okay. However, it does give us less expectations for Caine to ever change. And that might be a pessimistic way of looking at things, but I think that it's more of a relief than anything. If Caine could change now, that means that he could have always changed. And that would mean that everything he'd done was somewhat conscious. I'm not going into the moral implications of that, but I would say that's pretty bad considering everything that the circus members have gone through. I know a lot of people have mentioned I have no mouth and I must scream, and I think that there definitely is parallels between Caine and Am. However, I have 2 reasons for believing that Caine isn't going to go down the same route. One reason is that I don't think the creator, Gooseworx, is going to directly copy a villain from one story to the next. I don't think it would be original, and I just don't think that that's what they're going for, considering I think they've mentioned in a post, like, Caine isn't supposed to be like a malicious character. I'm not 100% sure on that fact, don't quote me, please. But my second reason is that Caine was never taught to hate. In fact, his 2 outbursts that I could remember out of my mind right now is when he yells at Bubble and he just goes, "You parasite." If we're believing that Bubble is a virus, that could have something to do with it. But I feel like that outburst was more so like a comedic moment than anything that we'd have to be worried about. As well as him having that moment with Zubul where he, and I quote, "will tear her to pieces." Yeah, that was quite frightening, but I don't think that it was meant to be taken seriously either. However, I would like to point out, because I think it's really interesting, Zubul seems to be the only one who's really outwardly cautious towards Caine as the AI. She's the only one who's ever pointed out the fact that Caine could switch up on them at any moment. I think that her speaking that thought out loud is what started a lot of the conversation within the community. Because she's right, even if I don't 100% agree that Caine is this malicious character, I think that the character should should be worried about this basically AI overlord that is always watching them, and just, I don't know, I just feel like she's probably the most goated character in that aspect. Like I was saying before, Am became a malicious character because he, one, became self-aware of the world around him, and two, he was never given any other choice but to hate. He was taught to kill. He's a machine meant for the purpose of killing. And when everything was said and done, when everybody was dead, he had nothing left. In my solid opinion, do I think Caine is a villain? No. Do I think he's going to be the antagonist in this story? Yes, but not in the way that I've seen online. I don't think he's purposely going to be torturing the characters. Like, that's just not I just don't see his character going that route, and I've seen a lot of depictions of him being like really evil and stuff, and I'm just like, oh, I just don't see it for his character. I see that at some point maybe he is affected by something, or maybe he does have a breaking point, but I don't think that's going to be sincere enough to come from him. Like I said, I feel like the bubble virus is really viable because it will give him an opportunity to have that snapping moment without breaking away from his character. His character was made to entertain the cast. I don't see him and his current state now causing harm. A lot of what we've seen him go through is just suffering because he's stuck in this position where he doesn't know what to do to have these people be entertained by him or engaged in his adventures. He's followed everything, every step, and still nothing is successful. Nothing is going his way. With that, I want to thank everybody who's made it this far into the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy whatever I post next. I had a lot of fun creating this piece and just talking about the Amazing Digital Circus and my obsession for like a little too long now. I've watched the episodes more times than I would like to admit. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!